Welcome to season 2 of my restorative gardening course. For those of you that I have not met before, my name is Jordan Mara and I am the founder of a company called Mind and Soil, where I'm looking to introduce 1 million individuals to gardening's mental health benefits. And with this, I'm hoping to help people see that there's so much more than just growing the fruits, the vegetables, and the flowers in the garden, but really how it can become a place where we find peacefulness, contentness, stillness, and restoration in each of our busy and hectic lives. Now, if you didn't get the chance to join us for season 1, I really encourage you to go back and watch those lessons as well, because we cover a number of really great gardening concepts, such as garden planning and how to plan your garden for the season ahead, indoor seed starting, prepping the soil, and many other topics. And in season 2, I'm going to be entirely focused on teaching you how to go about growing specific crops and really going from seed all the way to harvest. And so in today's lesson, I'm going to teach you how to grow broccoli. And I'm going to be completely transparent here. When it comes to broccoli, there's a number of things that I do differently to the kind of traditional ways or approaches to growing this particular crop. However, when you take a look at the broccoli that's coming out of my garden, I'm getting absolutely beautiful and amazing heads of broccoli. So I really encourage you to try out a number of these different steps, experiment with it, and see how it goes for you. And so to get started, our very first step is to plant your broccoli as a succession crop. Now, if you're like me, maybe you've tried growing broccoli and you've had some early or initial success with the plant growing really well, but just as it's getting ready to crown up and turn into that beautiful broccoli head, it bolts, goes to flower, and you're left with nothing but a ton of flowers and foliage on your end. Now, this bolting happens because it's most common for us to start our broccoli seeds at the same time that we start many of our midsummer crops, such as tomatoes and cucumbers. But what ends up happening with broccoli is that as it hits maturity, this coincides with the hottest days of summer. And broccoli is actually a bit more of a cool weather crop. So when it starts experiencing these really hot temperatures, it gets too much stress and therefore it bolts rather than crowning up into a head of broccoli, leaving you with nothing to be enjoying. So by starting it as a succession crop, which is growing into the fall portion of the season, what we're going to do is line up that maturity date with the temperatures getting colder in the fall time. So instead, I encourage you to try starting your broccoli seeds 100 days before your first frost. And so in order to find this out, it's actually really simple and easy to do. Now you might be wondering, well, when on earth is my first frost? And it's really easy to figure out. All that you need to do is go to Google and type in the name of your city and first frost, such as Squamish, first frost. And so for myself, that ends up being right around October 5th. It's going to vary from that a little bit, but we can use this as an initial line in the sand. And the reason why we're utilizing this first frost date is because once those frost temperatures arrive, our plants really aren't going to be putting on any more growth. So what that means is that we want to backtrack from that frost date so that we can ensure that the plant has grown all the way to maturity and is ready to harvest for that frost date. Now, when it comes to broccoli, this crop takes about 100 days to go from seed all the way to harvest. So the next thing that you want to do is look up what day is 100 days before your first frost date. Again, for myself, I'm going to be utilizing October 5th. And so for me, that ends up being June 27th. And when we look at all the broccoli in my raised bed in my backyard here, I started all of those seeds in the last week of June. And so starting my broccoli seeds much later on in the season than when I used to has resulted in me now getting these really beautiful heads of broccoli. And the reason why this is working so much better is because now when that broccoli plant is hitting maturity, it's not in the middle of the summertime when it's experiencing the hottest days, but rather it's right in the fall time. And so each week the temperature is dropping as it's getting closer to being ready to harvest. And this results in a way lower likelihood of that broccoli plant bolting and going to flower, and a way higher likelihood of you getting to enjoy a beautiful head of broccoli. So now that we know that we want to have our broccoli seeds getting started 100 days before the first frost, let's actually time travel back to that point in time in late June when I was getting these seeds started, because step 2 is to start your broccoli seeds in seed cells. Now, I'm going to explain why we do this in seed cells in just a second. I already warned you, I do things a little bit differently when it comes to growing broccoli than a lot of folks that are out there. But in order to get these seeds started, it's super easy and super straightforward. The first thing you're going to do is grab a bunch of 3-inch seed cells. And then you're going to go ahead and fill these up about 1 centimeter from the top with our worm casting seedling mix or a seed starting mix that you might have on hand. Give them a little shake to help kind of consolidate that seedling mix into one nice column. And then you want to go ahead and put 1 turkey base of water into each one of the seed cells. The reason why we do this is because for our seeds to germinate, they need to be in a warm and moist environment. And so we're going to be incorporating this moisture in several rounds, so it's a nice and consistent watering and watered environment for our seeds to germinate in. Once we've got that watering done, the next thing that we want to do is place 3 broccoli seeds into each one of these seed cells. And the reason why we put more than 1 seed into each one of these seed cells is because we want to ensure that at least one of them germinates and begins to grow. We covered this in one of the earlier lessons all around indoor seed starting, and the same concept applies here in the outdoor garden. Now, it's very likely that you're going to have more than 1 seed germinate in each one of these seed cells, and what this also allows is for you to then pick the strongest seedling, the one that's growing the best, and keep that one and thin the others out as you transplant them into your garden. So it also is ensuring that you're getting the absolute best seedlings into your garden. So once we have the 3 seeds in there, the next thing that we're going to do is our second round of watering. Once again, we're going to hit each one of the seed cells with 1 turkey base of water. And the last thing that we need to do is now put down about 1 centimeter or a ½ inch of seedling mix over top of them. And that's going to ensure that these seeds have some nice medium to grow through for their roots to hold onto as they germinate and begin growing. Once we've got all the seeds covered with seedling mix, all that we need to do is give it a third and final turkey base of water. So once again, we are giving each one of the seed cells here a full turkey base of water. Now, for these babies to germinate, they need 2 things: warmth and moisture. We've already covered off on the moisture front, but from a warmth perspective, we're in June, we're in very warm days, so we can start these seeds directly outside. And what's important to do at this point is ensuring that they're staying moist. And what I encourage you to do on this front is not actually follow a watering schedule, but rather take note from what's happening in your backyard. And so to know whether or not they need more water, all that you need to do is go up to the seed cells and place the back of your hand on the seedling mix. If you're not feeling any moisture in that seedling mix on the surface of it, then it's time to give it its next round of watering. And I really encourage you to utilize this practice of actually touching the seedling mix rather than following a watering schedule, because each one of us are going to have different environments and weather systems that we're starting these seeds within. You might have a really hot streak, in which case the seedling mix is going to dry up more quickly, and therefore you're going to need to water on a more frequent basis, potentially even multiple times per day. However, it's also possible that you could start these seeds in the middle of a little bit of a rainfall, and in that instance, they're probably getting more than enough water. You don't need to do any additional watering on your own. Or perhaps it's really windy, and in that case, it's once again going to be drying it out more quickly than in a non-windy environment. So pay attention to what's happening within your weather system when you start these seeds, and once again, place the back of your hand on the top of the seedling mix to ensure that it is moist at all times. If you do that, I know that you're gonna have a really high germination rate. We're gonna have babies popping through the surface, and they're gonna just grow in that seed cell until we're ready to transplant them into the garden. Now, speaking of, this is why we actually started these in seed cells rather than direct sowing them in the garden. Because when we look at the garden in early and mid and late June, it is completely full with vegetables that are in the middle of their growth. And so we don't actually have any space to transplant these into the garden yet. However, over the course of the coming 2-3 weeks, some of our earlier crops, such as arugula, carrots, beets, as well as garlic, are all going to be ready to be harvested and removed from the garden. At that point in time, space is going to become available for us to transplant the broccoli into the garden. And by starting them in the seed cells, we've been able to save about 3 weeks on the season before we hit that first frost date. See, it's all starting to make a little bit more sense now. Believe me on this, starting them in seed cells is a really great approach. So let's now say that we are a couple weeks later and our broccoli seeds have germinated and they're growing really, really well. And on top of that, we've harvested out all of the garlic from our beds. So we now have a full raised bed that is ready to be transplanted in with our broccoli. Before we do that though, we need to do one thing. And step 3 is to prep the soil. And the reason why this is such an important step is because for the last 9 months, our garlic has been growing in this raised bed. And in order for it to grow, it has been pulling nutrients from the soil. And the way that I encourage you to think about this is kind of like a soil bank account. So for that garlic to grow, it was making withdrawal after withdrawal of nutrients from the soil there. And so it's likely that the soil bank is now running a little bit empty, or at least a little bit low. And so what we need to do now is make a deposit of nutrients into the soil so that before we plant our broccoli, that soil bank account is totally filled back up with all the nutrients that our broccoli is now going to need in order to grow into the fall time here. So the way that we go about doing this is really, really simple. The first thing that we're going to do is add 1 inch of compost across the top of the bed. And this is a really great habit to get into anytime that you harvest a crop from your garden, because it helps replenish not only the nutrients, but it also adds new microbial life into the soil so that each successive crop, such as our broccoli in this instance, is all set up and ready to thrive. And other than that, there isn't anything else that we need to be doing in regards to prepping the entirety of the raised bed. Just adding that 1 inch of compost is plenty. And so that brings us on to step 4, which is transplanting your broccoli into the raised bed. And this is another area where I take a bit of a different approach to some gardeners that are out there, in that I give my broccoli a lot of space. The reason why is because over the next 60 days, these broccoli plants are going to start really small, but very quickly they are going to take off. And the foliage of broccoli plants is absolutely massive. And so if we plant them too close together, very quickly, those that were maybe a little bit smaller or a little bit behind, they're gonna fall further behind. And then they're gonna get shaded out by the broccoli plants and really ultimately struggle all throughout the season. So leaving a little bit more space allows each of the broccoli plants to grow without any interference from other plants. So the way that you're going to go about doing this is start at one end of your raised bed and dig your first transplant hole about 6 inches from the side of the bed. Now, you're going to measure all the way over 18 inches. And it's at that point that you're then going to dig the second transplant hole. So there are going to be 18 inches between these two plants. Now, after you have dug your transplant holes, the next thing that you're going to do is prep each of those transplant holes. And the way that you want to go about doing this is place 1 handful of worm castings into the transplant hole, and then place 1 tablespoon of 4-4-4 organic fertilizer into that transplant hole. These worm castings and organic fertilizer are another amazing investment of nutrients and microbial life right into where the root system is going to be growing. Your broccoli babies are going to be thanking you all through the season for all of these nutrients, all these microbial lives, allowing them to totally grow to their fullest potential. Now, with the transplant holes prepped, we're going to grab our broccoli seedlings and we're now going to transplant them into each of these respective holes. So the way that you're going to go about doing this is first grab the seed cell and weave the main stem through your fingers so that it's supported. Then go ahead and flip the seed cell upside down and tap the side of it a couple times so that you can then remove the seed cell from it, exposing all of the roots, all of the seedling mix that it has been growing in. Now, if the roots are starting to circle around the inside of that seed cell a little bit and you can see them going in a circle, go ahead and just gently massage them to loosen them up a little bit, as this will allow them to grow into all the new space that they have. Once you've done that, go ahead and place this into the transplant hole, and then just take some of the surrounding soil that we just dug up and push that back in to get it in there nice and snug so it doesn't have any room to move around or anything along those lines. And lastly, give it a nice and big drink of water. And this is gonna really help it settle into its new home. Again, the best thing that we can be doing for roots that have been a little bit shocked is give them a whole lot of water. It's gonna allow them to settle into their new forever home in the garden. Speaking of, watering now becomes one of the most important activities to ensure that they end up growing extremely well through the season. So step number 5 is watering your broccoli. And the biggest recommendation that I can make to you on this front is to set up a DIY automatic irrigation system. It can be a little bit daunting at the very beginning because there's different parts and different devices, but believe me, it is so simple, so easy to do. And as a matter of fact, I even put together a full video that's going to walk you through step by step how to go about setting up your very own DIY irrigation system. Trust me on this one, it's not as complex as it might seem or that you might be making it out to be in your head. It's really straightforward and a lot of fun to set up. Now, once you have it set up, what I like to do is take one watering spike and place it right at the base of the broccoli plant and then run it at a very low pressure. So it's essentially just dripping or bubbling into that root zone. This allows you to use very little pressure from your hose and ensures that all of the moisture, all of that water is going directly into the root zone where it's most needed. It does mean that I'm spending a little bit more money on feeder line and watering spikes in the initial setup, but it's allowing me to then be able to control my garden all throughout the season and ensure that each one of the plants are really getting the most optimal amount of water for them, as well as ensuring that there's as little overspray and wastage of water as possible, which for me is totally worthwhile, that initial investment in a little bit more feeder line and the additional watering spikes. Now, in terms of frequency, this is once again going to vary for each one of us depending on the unique system and weather cycles that we are in. If you're getting a lot of sun and really hot temperatures, you're probably going to need to water on a more frequent basis. And of course, vice versa, if you're getting cloudy days or even a lot of rain coming through. What I like to do is set my irrigation system up so that it runs for 20 minutes every 2 days. And if I go through a big hot spell, I might increase that to going every day. And then during those rainier times, I'll completely turn it off and just let Mother Nature do the watering during that time. So once again, don't go off of a really strict and regimented watering plan, but rather start by doing 20 minutes every 2 days and then adjust based on how well your plants are growing and what type of weather systems you're experiencing. So we've transplanted the broccoli into the raised bed. We gave it a really good feeding with worm castings, 444 organic fertilizer, as well as compost all across the bed. And we've also set up watering for it. One of the beautiful parts about broccoli is that once we have done this initial setup and transplanting, the plant really just grows on its own until it's ready to be harvested. So step number 6 here is harvesting your broccoli. And it really begs the question, when do I know that it's time to harvest my broccoli? And so it's going to be around 70 days after you started those seeds that you're going to notice the broccoli crown beginning to form. And you're going to want to start monitoring it as it grows to make sure that you get it at a really nice point in time. Again, we have a much lower likelihood of it bolting and going to flower because the temperatures are getting cooler as we get into the fall now. But what you want to be looking for is any sign that the flowers are starting to loosen or separate. So if you see any kind of cracks beginning to emerge in the broccoli head, that's a great sign that that plant is at the end of its growth. And if we leave it in the ground much longer, it's going to ultimately go to flower, begin loosening up, and we're not going to get that nice tight head of broccoli. So as you see any of those cracks beginning to emerge, again, it's going to be around day 100 that it's at full maturity. It's at that point that you want to harvest it off. All that you need to do is grab your pruning shears and go just below where that broccoli head is. So you're going to want to also harvest about 3 to 4 inches of the stem and simply go ahead and chop the broccoli head off, and then you can clean it up for yourself to be enjoying. Now, as you do this, I also encourage you to actually leave the rest of the plant in the ground, because what's going to happen is that now new broccoli spears are going to come out of where the main stem and the leaves or the foliage exist. So right in that armpit, don't be surprised if you see new broccoli spears beginning to emerge. That might give you a little bit more of a harvest off of your plants. And if you really want to harvest even more, you can actually take all of the leaves and the upper portion of the stem, so about the top 2/3 of the stem, and you can chop all that off, bring it into your kitchen, and then chop it down into smaller broccoli pieces, and you can saute them and then turn them into a nice creamy broccoli soup to be enjoying all throughout the wintertime. So do know that the vast majority of the broccoli plant, certainly more than just the head, is edible and can be enjoyed in a number of dishes such as a broccoli soup. And the last thing that I want to touch on is just what broccoli seeds should you be starting? And so there's a ton of different varieties that are out there. The most important part that you look for is the number of days to maturity for that plant. And you're gonna look for this on the seed packet. And what you wanna look for are varieties that say about 60 to 70 days until maturity. This will mean that days until harvest is gonna be right around 100. And so the variety that I have been growing and that you've been seeing in this video is Green Magic, and that's from West Coast Seeds that I have been utilizing there. So I encourage you to go with one of those varieties that, again, is in the 60 to 70 days to maturity. That's going to allow you to get those beautiful heads of broccoli off of your plants before those fall frosts emerge. Folks, that is everything that I wanted to cover off on for today. Go get your hands dirty, start some broccoli seeds, and I can't wait to catch you on the next lesson. See you then.